an hour, he assured her. Good money in those days. So when they finished, my mom tallied their hours, and she paid each worker his due in cash. And whatever was left, she gave the supervisor. That's how she ran her home. But home was just her base station. When her children's school needed volunteers, she enlisted, writing letters, penning poems, baking cookies. When a candidate to her cause needed signatures, there was Ruth, clipboard in hand, mouth in gear. During the 24 years that she spent raising her children, my mom found time to give to her community, but she would give even more during her autumn years. In her 60s and 70s, she was the playwright of choice for the Jewish Center seniors. There, her latent talents as a writer and actress reached full bloom. Over more than a dozen musical shows, Ruth's fetching scripts and guileless lyrics raised thousands of dollars while helping scores of seniors feel valued and young. As an aside, I don't have it here to show you how guileless she could be. I remember 18 years ago, it was the day before Valentine's Day, and my mother called me and said, "Paul, I need to know, are you going to come into Cincinnati from Maryland for Pesach?" I said, "No, Mom, you know, I've been dating Lena, and we were going to have a Seder together." She said, "Paul, you know, you can have a Seder with Lena next year. You know, this is your father, he's getting up in years." I said, "Mom, you know, tomorrow I'm going to propose to Lena, and she's going to say yes." So what were her first words? "Paul, have you seen her without makeup?" As Ruth entered her 80s, she stopped writing new plays, but she didn't stop serving the Jewish Center seniors. Each week, they would look forward to her discussion class. Can you see the hands? I believe we have one or more people here from the discussion class. I know I met one. They're shy. It was called the Think Tank. And to prepare fresh material for each class, my mom would spend 10 to 15 hours. The hours took their toll, and I urged her to retire, but she wouldn't hear of it. "They're counting on me," she'd explain. I could speak volumes about Ruth's marriage to my father, Sam, but there's little I could tell you that you don't already know. Their marriage was an open book, and whatever they did together. They volunteered together, they prayed together at Gulf Manor Synagogue, they even entertained audiences together. Sam with his singing, Ruth with her stand-up comedy. She was the yin to his yang. Together they raised 2 sons, a daughter, and a succession of cats. And for Ruth, raising the kids and the cats was not just a career, it was a calling, especially the cats. With 3 growing children, my mom took motherhood seriously. She devoured parenting advice from television shows to newspaper columns and books. But no expert could prepare her for the difficult middle child who stands before you today. One more aside, I remember it was late 1981. I was still in Cincinnati, and I got off the phone after making a date with the woman who would become my first wife, Jack English's daughter, Susan Lubinsky, and the mother of my son. And I said to my mom, "I have a date with Susan Lubinsky." What was my mom's response? "For God's sakes, Paul, don't antagonize her." It was a difficult son, but I knew how to behave when I had a date. Anyway, when I was 14, my mother asked Barry and me, "Kids, what are my 3 worst flaws?" My older brother had the good sense to say nothing. But our mom insisted on an answer. "I won't get angry," she promised. I think you can see where this is going. "Okay then," I offered. 1, you're overly protective. 2, you push food. And 3, you're not always logical. My mom's response was classic Ruth. And you're perfect? It's like a sitcom. A year later, she began serving us cooked carrots from Belgium. Sold in glass jars, these fancy finger-sized veggies were not your garden variety produce, and neither was their price. After 2 months, I said, look, Mom, let's go back to eating raw carrots. They cost less, they taste better, they're better for us, and they're easier to prepare. So, what'll it be, Belgian carrots or raw? Belgian, she said. Why? I demanded. Because, she explained. But that's not logical, I protested. Logic, 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 she sighed. I can't give you logic, Paul. I can only give you love. Showing love is what Ruth did best. Her children never wanted for self-esteem. Now, experts will tell you that's a good thing, but my wife, Lena, will tell you that in my case, it may have been too much of a good thing. When I was 12, we had a short-haired cat. Delilah would curl up on the Cincinnati Post as my mom would try to read it. And there, Ruth and Cat would remain until Cat decided to move on. Mom, I said, you love that cat too much. There's no such thing, my mother replied, as too much love. My mother passed too soon to be remembered in next year's Book of Life. But as long as her name means Rahmanis, she will be remembered in the Book of Ruth. In a short while, we will proceed to the cemetery where we will close that book. But before we do, let us write one last chapter, the epilogue. All the world's a stage, and an aspiring actress that my mom was, she was always on stage, eagerly playing a range of roles. But which role defined her? Devoted wife or doting Jewish mother? Political activist or playwright? Community volunteer or comedian? The answer, if we're honest, may be comedian. Ever the cut-up, Ruth was often likened to Lucille Ball. In fact, if not for the war, who knows? We may have tuned in to watch I Love Ruth. Imagine Hollywood would have paid Ruth to be Ruth. Inside her was an actress who missed the stage. I often wondered how heavy were her regrets. I caught a glimpse of these regrets in 1968, when my mom was 46. On the radio, Glenn Campbell was crooning his latest hit, Dreams of the Everyday Housewife. My mom was washing dishes, and as her hands scrubbed, her hips swayed to Chris Gantry's poignant lyrics. She picked up her apron in little girl fashion as something comes into her mind, slowly starts dancing, remembering her girlhood and all of the boys she had waiting in line. Oh, such are the dreams of the everyday housewife you see everywhere, any time of the day. An everyday housewife who gave up the good life for me. But the big reveal came 3 years later as we sat before our black and white television watching Masterpiece Theater. A man in his 50s was shedding tears, and his wife asked, "Dear, why are you crying?" And he answered, "I'm crying for my lost youth." And soon my mom joined him, and I asked her, "What's wrong?" And she cried, "Oh, Paul, I miss my lost youth." It would take a quarter century and a birthday cake that bore the numbers 40 before I understood how stealthily our youth slips away. My mother slipped away with her youthful spirit intact. I believe she knew this. I also believe that in the end she had few regrets. Though far from rich, she had led a rich life. She had raised good children and lived to see them do likewise. To the end, her 6 grandchildren, the 3 who shared her blood and the 3 who did not, remains her proudest legacy. If I know my mother, she's already building a new legacy. In the waiting room for heaven, she's making new friends, holding court with her stories, her jokes, and her songs. And when the gatekeeper calls their names, don't be surprised if they answer, "Nu, can you come back later?" Thank you all for coming.
Morning. Late Monday night, Ruth passed away. She went very peacefully, 91 years of age. In my book, she was the matriarch of the wealthiest family I know. Her spirit, love of life, and everyone around her invaded everyone in and around her life. I have the good fortune of having her spirit in our daughter, my wife, Diane, 2 kids, Sophia and Noah, and quite frankly, myself. She helped me be a better person. I love you, Ruthie, baby. You live on.
This is an email from Paul's stepdaughter, Hannah, that she emailed, I guess, yesterday. It goes like this. Dearest Bobby Ruth, I can't believe you're gone. I can't believe I'll never again be able to call and hear you exclaim, Hannah, how are Kiwi and the kids? To never again get one of your pep talks that always made me feel like $1 million. As my husband Kiwi pointed out correctly, each and every memory I have of you is a happy, positive one, and that's over a span of 31 years, not one bad memory. Whenever Kiwi and I discuss whether a perfect marriage really exists, your marriage to Zadie Sam is my prime example that there really are couples who have that beautiful, elusive type of relationship. Thank you for modeling so beautifully how to be a loving wife, mother, and grandmother. When I think of you, I have so many wonderful memories. Going to Hot Bagels countless times, the Union Terminal Museum, Kings Island, where you schlepped around all day in the summer heat with me and Nahum, and then you fainted in the elevator of the Eiffel Tower ride. Okay, I guess I didn't skim this one. You sure gave us a scare, but thank God you were fine. When I'm driving and I get lost or end up driving around in circles, I never stress out. I just remember occasionally getting lost on the way to somewhere fun with you and Zadie. Of course, this was in the days before GPS, and how it was an exciting adventure, almost as good as the destination itself. You were so young at heart, you called Zadie a goofball, and we laughed and laughed. You went out of your way to give me and Nahum a wonderful time whenever we were in Cincinnati, and whenever you visited us. Thank you for coming to visit us in Houston with Diane and Sophia. We all remember it so fondly. We only wish you all could have stayed longer. You went to shul every week into your Bible class. You always spoke about the Kollel with such respect and admiration. You always took such good care of yourself and encouraged me to do the same. Once you sent me an exercise DVD that you enjoyed and thought I would like. You wore beautiful suits, high heels, and lipstick, exercised, and most of all, you enjoyed life. You were always giving classes, writing plays. You were so creative. You had such a dramatic way of speaking. It was lovely. You were blessed with an upbeat, happy